what needs to be in this pilot episode to intrigue people to want to know more about the story, about
Ooh,
the
that's a
show?
really good question. Yeah. When I was thinking about writing my own TV pilot, and also when I've talked to my friends, so Phil Shabazz, who plays Lazarus Lagmani in our short film, he asked me to read his pilot, and he actually did a pilot episode with a story Bible, which basically gives the rest of what happens in the rest of the season, and it highlights each of the characters and stuff like that.
Okay.
Which I thought was cool. Or a series Bible, I guess you'd call it, because he even had a season 2 like that he could pitch on top of the season 1. So that's always a good thing to have as well. Like in the film world, we'd call that more of like a lookbook, and it's about the film itself. But this is like a series Bible, saying like, because the one difference with film versus TV is a lot of times, not always. I can't remember the guy who writes for White Lotus. He writes every episode himself. Like, he just does it all. There's several writers like that. Taylor Sheridan, the Yellowstone guy,
Okay.
he writes all of the stuff himself too. In other words, he doesn't have a writer's room. But a lot of times, the traditional format for TV is that you would have a showrunner. So you might be the showrunner, Tones, and then you say, I'm gonna have a writer's room, and Candid's gonna be in the writer's room, and Colin's gonna be in the writer's room, and then I'm gonna hire 3 other writers to be in the writer's room, and then we're gonna constantly pitch ideas and just make sure that the story is like exactly on track where we want it to go. And that's how they get episodes done faster, so that they can move into production, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
And so you generally will have a room around you, which is why a series Bible is important, so that for the person whose idea it was not, can always refer back to, well, what does this Bible say about where we're going? You know what I mean? It's a document that guides everybody through the process. So that was a lot of not answering your question. So let me answer your question. I think some of the biggest things to do in a pilot episode are to, and this is true of any story, right? Like you can think of the pilot episode as like almost like the beginning of Act 1 of the screenplay, or the beginning of Act 1 of a comic book, or whatever. What do you need to know in Act 1? I need to know who these characters are. I need to know why I should care about these characters. And I need to know the central conflict that's going to happen in this show, right? And you can take a pilot episodes that we've all seen, and you can kind of break all of that down, right? Like Game of Thrones basically introduced us and said, here are the Lannisters and here are the Starks, and they're very different from each other. And here's why you should care about each of them. You should basically learn to hate the Lannisters as soon as you see them, and you should learn to love the Starks as soon as you see them, despite their flaws, right? And then what else did it give us? It gave us the central conflict of them saying the Starks are going to enter a realm that is uncomfortable to them, and they're going to be influential, or they could be influential or not influential in that new world, the politics of the realm, because they've not really been about the politics of the realm all that much, and they've been kind of self-contained and protected. So if they enter the politics of the realm, what does that mean? That's going to cause conflict of some way, shape, or form. And then there's prophecies about them. Oh my gosh, this is getting even crazy. There's dire wolves that they're getting, which, by the way, the dire wolves didn't end up being a main part of the story.
Yeah, I know.
And then also the Lannisters. The Lannisters have all this power and control. But remember how the end of episode 1 ends, when you realize that like the Lannisters are super corrupt. Like, not only do they, spoiler alert here, if you haven't seen Game of Thrones, not only do they kill Eddard Stark, but they also are having incestuous relationships, and killing a kid who was spying on them is no big deal to these people, right? Or trying to kill a kid. So that has so much. So what's essential there? Characters that we care about. I mean, one of the big things about Game of Thrones is that big spoiler at the end of episode 1 when they kill Eddard. Is like, that's the one guy in all of Game of Thrones that everybody that watches could be like, that's probably the hero, and they're like, fuck that guy, he's done, right? So like that takes the whole show in a new direction of like, what world am I watching? Because I've never seen anything like this before, right? So to me, you got to have these characters that people really care about. You have to have a central conflict that's introduced early on that showcases kind of what kind of world I'm getting into, and whether or not I care about that central conflict. Do I care about the politics of the realm and the politics of families and how they interact? Or do I go, no, that's not really my jam? Do I care about the genre? Do I care about entering a fantasy genre and watching a whole series about fantasy? Or do I not? Am I not into that? Do I care about the subject matter that's going to be in this show? Or is I read the books first and I was like, these books are so depressing that I'm not sure I can watch the show. And the show was actually less depressing, so I was able to actually watch it and like enjoy it. But like, I got to know those things as an audience to know whether or not I want to invest my time.